over the state. Not just 5 people in your backyard, but people all over the state. You organize people in his legislative district, and you say, we're going to make this the issue in the next election for state legislature. This is the issue. This is the thing the Constitution says is necessary. You're refusing to pass this piece of legislation. We're going to do everything to remove you and put somebody else in.
Wouldn't this be considered by official Homeland Security status as a form of homegrown terrorism in the United States?
It's called lobbying.
I know that, but the translation of which?
Well, they can translate it any way they want. All right, it's called lobbying. It's what's done every kind of legislation that you can imagine. People, they get themselves organized either because they're in an industrial group, a business group, or what have you, or they can organize themselves this way around some particular issue. They draft some legislation, or they get somebody to draft a piece of legislation for them. They take it to their state representative, or to Congress for that matter, and they say, we want this thing passed. And if the fellow doesn't pass it, then that particular union or trade association, whoever it was that sponsored the legislation, says pretty clearly, we're going to work against you in the next election. This is the way the political system works. But interestingly enough, the purpose of this particular exercise is not to put in a piece of special interest legislation. It is to put in the ultimate piece of general interest legislation.
I like it.
You see the difference?
What about the rumblings from this administration that there will be a youth national security force formed and that it will be compulsory? What is that about? I just wanted to ask you because I heard Rahm Emanuel talk about it last year.
Yeah, and
it was very disconcerting.
Obama has also mentioned it. And all I would say to those two people, I think I said this in a column once on News with Views, I said if they're really serious, if they really think that this is necessary, then the Constitution tells them how to do it. We don't need some new system that's going to be invented by Rahm Emanuel. The Constitution's already told us exactly how to do this. And so Mr. Obama should be in favor of exactly what I'm doing. In fact, I should be getting a call from him to come down to the White House so that we could work out the plan for getting this done in the other 50 states, in the 50 states. And ultimately, the reason would be, who is the commander-in-chief of the militia?
Who is?
The President of the United States. When they're called into the actual service of the United States, I mean, there's a little fillip there, there's a little limitation. But if anyone in his position as president is out there talking about, well, we need to have this huge force of people trained to deal with these problems in our country, the answer is right there. Did he ever read Article 2 of the Constitution that expresses his powers and his authority?
Isn't he a constitutional attorney?
Well, I've heard that. I don't know. I mean, I never attended a class that he taught. I heard that he taught constitutional law somewhere in Chicago. But, I mean, if I were the president or someone running for president, I might read that section of the Constitution, Article 2, and I would see in Article 2, Section 2, Clause 1, the statement that I, as president, am commander-in-chief of the militia of the several states when called in the actual service of the United States. I would see that right there. And I would say, oh, if I need to have this huge group of people to deal with these Homeland Security problems, my goodness, the Constitution gives it to me. And I would be out there. You know what I would do? I would call a conference of the governors of the 50 states, get them all to the White House, and sit down with them and say, here's what we need to do in the next 6 months. I want all you folks to go back to your states and come up with the appropriate legislation, and let's get these militia structures revitalized so that we can deal with Homeland Security problems.
Instead, what's happening?
Well, instead what they're doing exactly the opposite. They're a bunch of idiots. Let's face it. All right? They talk about, they're conspiring to do this New World Order and all this other. They're just idiots. This is really low-level kindergarten mentalities that we have running the country, unfortunately. A bunch of juvenile delinquents. This is trivial. Read the instruction manual. My God, the instruction manual for the President of the United States is not even 2 pages long.
Did you actually watch the president take the oath of office?
No.
There was one thing, and I haven't watched a president take the oath of office in a while, but I watched it this time. And the one thing that struck me that I was very disturbed by is when he said, I will try to uphold the Constitution. What does that mean? I will try.
I don't know. Maybe he was subconsciously recognizing his human fallibility. That we can never be sure that we'll do everything we are supposed to do.
But isn't that a very integral role of the President of the United States?
Well, the President of the United States has a duty under the Constitution to take care that the laws will be faithfully executed, including the Constitution. All right, that's his duty. Now, granted, the most he can do is try. I guess people can fail even in performing their legal duties. People can make mistakes, but that is his duty. And if you look at that militia provision in the Constitution, giving him this authority, delegating the authority to him as commander-in-chief. My gosh, if I were the president, I'm looking at the Constitution that says I'm commander-in-chief of the militia, I'd say, where is this thing? Where are these militia that I'm supposed to be commander-in-chief of? Oh, they don't exist? Oh, well, I better go do something about it because that's part of my execution of the laws. I may need these people. What if we have an insurrection? What if we have an invasion? The Constitution says Congress will call out the militia for these purposes, and I'll be the commander-in-chief. Well, I won't be the commander-in-chief of them if they don't exist. I won't be able to fulfill my constitutional duties if I needed these entities and they're not here. This is the first thing I'd go and do.
Don't you think that other countries around the world know that we're splintered and spread very thin?
Oh, my goodness, sure. Absolutely. You can read this in the Russian press all the time.
It's kind of scary. We're everywhere. We're all over the place.
Yeah, and we're not dealing with, you have to secure your home base before you start worrying about overseas adventures. And there's our difficulty. We have a crumbling infrastructure. Most of our basic industries are, if they haven't been shipped to foreign countries, they've been allowed to deteriorate. We've got an educational system that's totally rotten. We've got a political system that's totally corrupt, that's only interested in who's making a buck for some special interest group. The media is completely degenerate. And the vast mass of people are more interested in who wins the Super Bowl than whether we're going to be involved in a war with Iran next week. So I would say we have all sorts of difficulties. But fundamentally, my view is they come back to this point that people have allowed themselves to get away from their fundamental duty, each individual's fundamental duty, to be a participant in the system of self-government. You can't have self-government unless you participate. Self-government is not a spectator sport. And to the extent people allow that to happen, if you're not governing yourself, somebody else is going to fill that vacuum and start governing you. If you refuse to participate in the system, that doesn't mean the system goes away. It just means that somebody else takes over, and then you will find yourself subject to somebody else's directives. You will no longer be a self-governing individual. You will be governed by somebody else.
Do you think there's still a window to shift anything?
Sure. Absolutely. And you know why I know that? Because we're talking about it right here and now. We still have a sufficient amount of free speech. We still have a sufficient opportunity for free association. We still have a sufficient opportunity, at least in some of the states, to gain control directly or indirectly of our state legislatures and get some legislation passed. The difficulty is that the crisis, the onrushing crisis, is one line on the graph, and the other line on the graph is the level of public education. Do we have enough time to educate enough people or to find enough people who are already educated to take these steps? That I don't know. That's the real problem. That's the roll of the dice. Are there enough people?
That's the X factor.
Yeah, the X factor. I think there are enough people, but we're spread out all over the place. That's the difficulty. There's no one mailing list. There's no one email list that you can press that button and all of a sudden you contact all of these people all over the country. You have to find them rather laboriously with what we're doing right now, right?
Let's talk about the TSA for a moment, can we?
Sure.
It just happens to be very ripe and happening, and there was a gentleman who is a war journalist who was handcuffed because he wasn't cooperating with TSA and apparently was asked for his email passcodes and how much money he makes. Michael Yon, I think.
Yon, yeah, right. I read about it.
And I want to know your response to this.
Well, my response to it is they have such authority as they have, and it goes no further.